Welcome to TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed. This podcast is about your work as a caring professional and the ideas we can share to elevate and expand what we offer to those we serve. My name is Dr. Tim Gravoy, Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting, and I'm excited to introduce Chris Porter to the show today. Chris Porter is a full-time freelancer and consultant with a passion for helping people use Notion to unlock their individual or team's full potential. With 6 years of experience freelancing and consulting, Chris Porter has a unique and insightful perspective on managing ADHD, overcoming challenges, and embracing neurodiversity. Chris Porter has been featured in Arizona Daily Star, Prompt Pod with Danny Kirk, co-host of Two Confirmations, Bitcoin Rapid Fire with John Vallis, and regularly speaks on topics such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, and ADHD. Chris, did I get that right?
You got it right. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Chris, I invited you on your show in particular because of your interest in supporting entrepreneurs with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Can you tell me a little bit more why you're so passionate about this topic?
Absolutely, Tim. I was diagnosed when I was 6 years old with ADHD. And back then they just called it ADD. So I'm the inattentive type, but they've grouped it all together since then. And I really struggled in school until I hit community college and my astronomy class. And I had a teacher that just really believed in me and gave me lots of resources and gave me kind of extracurricular things to do. And I really started to thrive at that point and realized I actually am intelligent. It's just that the way that I've approached school or the way that it was kind of presented to me just didn't work for the way my brain worked. And so ever since then, I've on one hand wanted to unlock that potential in myself, but then also seeing other people that are, some of them that are still struggling, just like I was before I went to that community college. And then there's others that are doing, exceedingly amazing things that have ADHD. And so my heart goes out to those that haven't yet figured out what works for their brain and how to move them from that one camp to that other camp of people that are, just thriving and really successful.
So you found a lot of success then with one particular course at a community college, and it sounds like it was a pretty transformative experience. How did that end up transferring to everything else?
I think that course, like realizing that I could push into topics and learn about them, not just in the way that the teacher was presenting it, but going into the library and hyper focusing on so if I was taking math, checking out as many books as I wanted to on all sorts of different math topics. And some, if I'm going through calculus, like maybe some of them are related to calculus or the story behind the numbers, and giving my brain kind of that structure that it needed to fill in the information. So as maybe a global thinker, I wanted to have that backstory as to why did calculus come about? Oh, it was Galileo and the movement of the planets. Oh, there's this real thing out there. Like this isn't just a whole bunch of made up rules. There's a reason behind why. And my brain wanted to know that reason. And so by going and researching and kind of using my ADHD hyperfocus to zero in on a whole bunch of different topics and just nerd out about it, I was able to come back into the classroom and apply what I had learned outside the classroom, and suddenly I was engaged and I was curious to learn more. Like, oh well, how does that work? How else can we apply calculus? Oh, what are those other things that maybe my brain could help to unlock?
So your preference then in terms of how you know yourself as a learner is it really isn't going to be something that happens during the class period. It's going to be something that happens outside the class period, and so you found things that you could do that would allow you access to the content, but it also sounds like to be able to participate in that class time in more useful ways without necessarily having to kind of sit and attend to the lecture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was definitely one of those kids that was raising my hand constantly and asking questions, and engaging was what really helped me. And then at community college, because of the kind of the classes were kind of spread out, I could go outside and juggle or unicycle, or I would bring all sorts of things with me to be moving and active, which come to find out later, that helps to release dopamine by having physical movement or going and exercising, or even driving from one campus to the other. Often I didn't realize it, but having classes at one campus and having to drive to the other campus, that actually helped to reset my brain and then helped me to focus when I step back into that next classroom.
Mm-hmm. So all of those things then, if are things that you've kind of discovered about yourself, and so now it sounds like that you've got some things that you're working on right now that are meant to help other folks with ADHD also experience some kind of success. Can you talk about some of those things?
Absolutely. So two of them that come to mind immediately are, one is the Pomodoro method, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. I have a kitchen timer on my desk. I've got the timer, the sound turned off, so it just beeps, it just blinks at me when my time is done. And I've been using that for about the last 15 years, and it helped me to kind of get into that zone of working, but then take that 5-minute break. So I set the timer for 25 minutes. Once it goes off, I take a 5-minute break, and that break may just mean sitting and processing everything that was going on. It may be going to a glass of water or going to the bathroom, but I find that like racing myself, even if I do need to go to the bathroom, waiting until that timer goes off, it pushes me to keep focusing and keep working on that thing. And so the other, I'm looking at my sheet right now where I have 9 different strategies and 9 different tactics. So I'm having to be very precise with which ones I pick out. But another one that's really helped me is something called body doubling, which there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. One way is by jumping on Zoom with one or several or 100 other people and working for a period of time, and just so I jumped on one where there were 75 people. They would do a breakout session of, okay, what are you going to work on over the next hour? And you'd share what you're working on with 2 or 3 other people. And then you'd stay on Zoom and you'd work on that for the next 50 minutes. And then at the end of the session, you go back into those same breakout groups and say, okay, how did that go for you? And that social pressure, that knowing that I'm going to have to share what I worked on those last 50 minutes really motivates my brain. And it's a way of almost tricking my brain into really focusing in on those things that I need to do. And I find, if I do that for an hour in the morning every day, that is my most productive hour, is that body doubling session. And there's other apps on phones. There's you could do it in person with somebody, like going to a coffee shop. So I've done many of them. But I found that effective, and I want to help other people to kind of embrace these tools and find what works for them. That some of these might work and some might not, but keep testing and trying what will work for you and your brain. My guess, if I had to postulate, it would be something having to do with like mirror neurons, and that my brain is seeking out what they're thinking about. Oh, they're watching me. Oh, okay, I need to get back to work. And the other is this idea that ADHD and maybe other neuroatypical people, we need a certain amount of stimulus, like a greater amount of stimulus than just normal people. Like if you put somebody into a blank room where there's nothing going on, they have a very hard time focusing. Like we, as humans, we need some amount of focus. As an ADHD person, I need a little bit more stimulus than other people. And so going to a coffee shop and putting my noise canceling headphones on really actually helps me get things done. And sometimes I'll even play like a background music that sounds just like a coffee shop. So the app's called Coffeetivity. And so it's like productivity, but the sounds of a coffee shop. And that gives me some stimulus that kind of helps me refocus somehow.
And so the whole idea of mirror neurons, there's like books all over the place all about that too. But that seems like that could probably be where the effectiveness of body doubling really is. That, hey, if somebody else is doing a thing, then I should probably be doing that thing too. And just in terms of how we think about the work that I do with schools, and perhaps could rethink how we think about what that quote unquote distraction-free environment that we're trying to create really is. That actually a little bit of noise is quite the opposite of a distraction when we're really coming down to it with things like that. Well, you know what? Let's take a quick break, and when we come back from break, let's talk a little bit more about what implications then some of the strategies and tactics that you've collected and are working on might actually have for school leaders.
Sounds great.
Well, welcome back. So, Chris, we've been talking a bit about ADHD and some of your work and your interests in ADHD in the past. And I'm just wondering, I work mostly with school and with district leaders, and you work primarily with entrepreneurs and other folks in the business world who have ADHD. And I'm wondering, how might you think that the work that you do might be supportive to school and district leaders?
Yeah, I think all of the tools, the way that I've framed this this guide is for like someone to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd have to fully understand more like how involved a teacher would be able to do it in teaching some of these things. But I'm looking at one of the first tactics on here, which is surfing the urge, and it's the idea of when you feel an urge come up that, oh, I need to get up and do this, or, oh, I want to check my backpack to make sure my lunch is there. So I'm putting myself in the shoes of a child, that just writing down that thing that you are, feeling this urge, oh, I want to say this, that, I want to stand up and say this thing in class. If you can acquire this habit of writing down what that urge is, and then I'm a big fan of timers, and you set a timer for maybe 5 minutes. And at the end of those 5 minutes, if you still have that same amount and degree of urge that you did at the beginning, then you're allowed to do that thing. And so that might be for an ADHD kid that is just constantly like, oh, I need to get up and do that. Oh, I need to get up and do this. Like having a pen and a pad, maybe even calling this notebook, like surfing the urge, where they can just write down all of their impulses and then setting that timer. And this would take working with that teacher to like give them permission to actually do that thing, once they wrote it down. But what you'll come to find out is that many times that urge goes away by you've given yourself permission. Okay, brain, we really will do this thing if you still really want to do it in 5 minutes. And instead of just trying to don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a pink elephant. Well, what are you going to do when you say it? Like the urge actually comes back stronger if you try to push it down. So this is a way of not suppressing, but rather redirecting an urge. So I think teachers that use that tool to help their kind of impulsive students, that might really be effective for them. I think another one, looking at my strategies, would be discovering your distraction triggers. Mm-hmm. And so I would say like having a journal of like every time that you want to go do that other thing. So maybe if you could use this in tandem with that surfing the urge, realizing when you're feeling that, there's often, and this is a fairly high, higher level of maybe self-actualization, or like you obviously wouldn't be teaching this to kindergartners, right? So it might be for high schoolers or junior hires. Okay.
You'd be surprised at what 6-year-olds can do in terms of being in tune with themselves and their own social and emotional needs. So that's what a lot of our work in social emotional learning really is. And so it sounds like what you're really saying is that, you know what, just kind of notice what does get me distracted. And then from there, we can figure out how we can shape an environment to do that. And we actually have conversations with 6-year-olds about these kinds of things all the time.
Cool. Yeah. So what I'm encouraging in this, from researchers like Andrew Huberman and others, to write down what are those things that are pulling your attention away, mm-hmm. and finding what that common thread is, that either it's really boring or it's something that you're having trouble with. So maybe, for me, it was spelling as a kid. I was just a horrible speller, and I still am a horrible speller. But realizing when I had to sit down and do a writing assignment that I was stressing over the spelling of these different words, if I were to be writing down each time, like, what am I feeling? Oh, I'm really feeling distracted. Well, why? Well, what am I afraid of? Oh, I'm afraid of like that I'm going to turn this in and have everybody laugh at me because it's spelled wrong. If I had someone that could have worked with me and given me permission, like, hey, on this first draft, like, don't worry about spelling at all, like, and really encourage that process, that would have helped me to just get through the assignment and potentially be less distracted and then I could, do that next draft. So yeah, it's really just a self-realization and a way of journaling to learn about yourself and what's causing that distraction.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of strategies and tactics kind of figured out and mapped out and thought through, and have been ones that you've practiced yourself very much in your life. Well, let's go ahead and let's take a break. And when we come back, let's have a final thought actually from you, Chris, just about how you might suggest that somebody with ADHD navigate that whole process as a caring professional. All right, well, welcome back. Chris, it's been great to talk to you today. And given all the ground that we've covered, I'm wondering, what final thought might you have for us?
So there's a great book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And I wish I had read and learned about this sooner. Because it's something that I struggle with, is having a positive mindset. And when I'm encountering things, especially as an adult, I've realized that I'll approach something and I just expect to know it really well and to be able to do a good job when I first sit down to do it. And lo and behold, that's not the case. And so I think children, some children are great at this, where they approach something with this growth mindset of like, oh, I'm brand new at this. Can you draw an elephant? Sure. And they just take credit and they just start drawing something that looks vaguely like an elephant. And I think for kids that get into this fixed mindset where, it has to be perfect, or I started 100 and anything less than perfect, I just start going down. Learning how to apply this growth mindset is just get better, like do something and then get better. And to focus on that positive aspect instead of, I have to be perfect or
perfection and nothing else other than perfection is a rather unattainable goal for anyone ever at any point. And certainly for folks with ADHD, perfectionism seems to sneak in and just live side by side for some reason, for sure. So the final thought of just